I am a 24-year-old guy named Evan Mitchell, the oldest of three. And if there is one constant in my life, it is that I have always been the responsible one. When my parents divorced when I was 12, I basically stopped being a kid. My dad, Gary, was 48 at the time and working long hours in construction management, and my mom had already emotionally checked out before the divorce was finalized. After the split, I lived with dad most of the time. At first, it was just the two of us, and then 2 years later, dad remarried Nicole, who was 38 at the time. They started a family together and had Liam, who is now 6, and Ava, who is 4. They are great kids, but the moment they were born, I stopped being a brother and became an extra parent. Being the responsible one was not something anyone asked me about. It just happened. When other 12-year-olds were worrying about school dances or video game releases, I was reheating leftover chicken nuggets, helping with homework, making sure that Liam brushed his teeth, and calming Ava down when she cried because she was overtired. I was the one doing bedtime stories, packing school lunches, wiping counters, and remembering when teacher conferences were scheduled. If dad needed to work late, which happened constantly, he would walk in the door, see me managing the chaos, ruffle my hair, and say things like, "That is my guy. I do not know what we would do without you." Thanksgiving gifts, Christmas gifts, birthday cards, everything included some version of thank you for stepping up. Meanwhile, everyone else my age was getting gift cards, phones, and wireless headphones. I remember thinking that appreciation did not pay for gas or college textbooks, but I also just kept carrying the load because the kids were not the problem. I cared about them, and they relied on me, so I did the job. Through high school and into college, it only intensified. I worked around 30 hours a week while taking 17 credits at community college to save money, and I still came home 5 nights a week to dad cheerfully announcing from the hallway that they were running late, and pizza money was on the counter, so put the kids to bed. Then the door would slam and they would disappear for hours while I supervised homework, cleaned up dinner, bathed Ava, and tried to study while making sure no one colored on the furniture. Dad always talked about paying me back someday, but someday never came. I became the unpaid live-in caretaker who did not ask questions and did not say no. After I graduated and got a decent entry-level IT job, I did something shocking in the family's eyes. I moved out. I found a tiny but expensive one-bedroom apartment in Denver, and I told Dad and Nicole that I loved them but I needed my own life. Suddenly, the reality of childcare hit them. They needed someone after school a few days a week, and the babysitting rates in Denver were around $25 an hour. I watched Dad calculate that number in real time, watched his eyes widen, and I could practically hear him thinking that I had been doing that job for free for years. Fast forward to this year. Dad and Nicole announced that they were going on a long overdue honeymoon. They had never taken one, and they planned a 10-day trip to Mexico. They announced it at a backyard barbecue with the whole family present. Everyone clapped and cheered until Nicole casually followed it with the sentence that, of course, Evan will be watching the kids. I froze in the middle of putting mustard on my hot dog. This was the very first I had heard about it. I told them calmly that I worked full-time, I was not taking 10 days off, and I was not moving the kids into my apartment. I told them to find alternative arrangements. They stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Nicole huffed and said that family takes care of each other. I told her that family also pays sitters. The conversation carried on like that for weeks. They insisted that I would do it because I always did it. I kept saying no. I assumed they finally understood because they stopped pushing the issue near the departure date. Then the morning they left arrived. At exactly 6:12 in the morning, my phone pinged because my Ring camera detected movement. Still half asleep, I looked at the screen and saw my dad and Nicole on my porch with 2 half-asleep kids in pajamas, backpacks in hand. My phone immediately rang. Dad said through the phone that they were already running late and thanks again, buddy, before hanging up. I opened the door in shock, and they basically guided the kids inside like someone dropping off a package and then sprinted to the waiting rideshare car. I stood there in total disbelief, holding a 4-year-old who smelled like dry cereal while watching the rear lights of the car disappear down the street. I looked down at the kids who were confused but excited. I could not take out my frustration on them. They had no idea that their parents had just abandoned them without consent. But I also was not going to babysit for 10 days after I had already said no repeatedly and clearly. I told Liam that we were going on a little trip, loaded them into my car, and drove back to Dad's house. I still knew the garage code, so I let them in, set them up with snacks I brought from my apartment, pulled out their tablets, and called a professional nanny service. I explained the situation, ordered emergency childcare coverage at their house, and charged everything to Dad's credit card, which he had never removed from our shared accounts. The first week alone cost $1,420, and that was only the start. 2 days into their honeymoon, Dad started sending me furious messages from Mexico. The text went from confusion to anger to accusations that I was irresponsible and ungrateful. I responded by saying that they had dropped off minors without permission and left the country, which is literally considered abandonment, and that they should be thankful that I hired a professional nanny instead of calling someone with a badge. After that, silence. When they returned 10 days later, they acted like I had committed a felony. Nicole cried on social media about how young people have no sense of family commitment. Dad gave me a dramatic speech in the kitchen about betrayal and disappointing them. I told him that he had known my answer for a month and chose to ignore it, and that he assumed I would fold because I always had. I did not raise my voice. I just stated the facts. Now the extended family is split. Some think I should have just done it since I am good with the kids. Others say Dad and Nicole treat me like I am staff, not family. So, AITA? So here's something nobody expected after the fallout from the babysitting incident. The entire family was still buzzing, gossiping, and taking sides when the one person no one wanted to get involved suddenly entered the battlefield. My grandmother. My dad's mother, Dorothy, 72 years old, 5 feet tall, white hair that never has a single strand out of place, and a personality like a decorated military commander who has fought every battle and come back stronger. This woman has the moral authority of a judge, the insight of a psychologist, and the guilt power of an entire church congregation combined. She has never needed to shout to get a point across. People stop talking when she lifts an eyebrow. She called me one afternoon with her quiet, polite voice, asked how I was doing, and then asked what had actually happened. I did not sugarcoat anything. I told her everything from start to finish, how Dad and Nicole told everyone at the barbecue that I would be babysitting without asking me first, how I repeatedly said no, how they still showed up at my apartment at 6 in the morning and shoved 2 confused small children through the door before sprinting to the airport, how I drove the kids back home, hired a nanny, charged everything to Dad's card, and how Dad and Nicole reacted with dramatic messages and moral outrage when they realized I was not going to be their unpaid household help anymore. While I spoke, she did not gasp or interrupt. She just sat there listening, perfectly calm. When I finished, she went silent for a long moment that made my stomach tighten. Then she said only 3 words in a tone that did not rise above conversational. I will handle it. That was the moment I realized that my father and stepmother had absolutely no idea what was about to hit them. 40 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was Dad. He sounded like a child who had been dragged to the principal's office. He said that Grandma had arrived without warning at their house and informed them that they were having dinner together. My grandmother does not ask, she announces, and people adjust their schedules accordingly. I could practically picture her sitting at the dining room table back straight, hands folded, waiting for them to sit down and listen. Apparently, she delivered a speech that could have been engraved on stone tablets and carried down a mountain. She told them that they had abandoned their children, placed them on my doorstep without agreement, left the country, and expected their adult son to continue serving as free childcare forever. She informed them that this behavior ended effective immediately. Dad tried to defend himself, but she shut him down with the sentence that she had raised him better than this and that she would not tolerate excuses. She told them that moving forward they needed to hire childcare and budget for it like adults, And she added that they also owed me an apology, not a half-hearted explanation or a defensive monologue, but a real apology. I can only imagine the silence in that dining room. My dad is a grown man who manages teams of workers on construction sites, yet his tone on the phone sounded like he had been ordered to sit in a corner and think about what he had done. I was stunned because Grandma rarely steps in. She is not the type to pick sides in normal family drama. She believes people should work things out themselves unless someone truly crosses a line. And apparently she had decided that line had been yanked out of the ground, snapped in half, and thrown into a bonfire. After the call with Dad ended, I received another notification. My phone pinged with a Venmo payment from Grandma for $200. The memo line read, "Proud of you for standing up for yourself. Buy something that makes you happy and not diapers." I stared at the message for a full 10 seconds before laughing out loud. It was the most perfect grandmother response imaginable. She did not just support me with words, she put her money where her principles were. She basically told me that if anyone was going to reward me for taking responsibility, it was going to be her, and that childcare costs should be handled by the parents and not the oldest sibling who has already been playing a second parent for more than a decade. Word spread quickly. Suddenly, the tone from family members who had been saying, "I should have just watched," the kids changed almost overnight. It turns out that once Grandma weighs in, the conversation shifts dramatically. A few relatives who had been criticizing me started quietly editing their opinions. One cousin even sent a message saying that if Grandma sided with me, she probably had information they did not, and they wanted to hear my side again. It was wild watching how fast people recalibrated their morals when a 72-year-old woman with unstoppable moral gravity planted her flag. In the following days, things noticeably changed. Dad and Nicole stopped posting vague morality tales on Facebook about how young people have forgotten the meaning of family. The dramatic sighing and martyr tone evaporated. They began paying for childcare on a regular basis. Dad even texted to tell me that he had sorted out long-term babysitting twice a week, and they were adjusting their budget accordingly. I did not respond with a victory lap. I just said good because that is the healthy thing for everyone involved. Liam and Ava now have consistent caretakers who are trained professionals. The household is functioning like a family system, where responsibilities are divided by choice rather than guilt. And I am no longer the crutch they lean on without noticing I am carrying the weight. I never asked Grandma to intervene. I did not even hint that I needed help. All I did was tell her the truth when she asked. She decided on her own that enough was enough and that someone needed to draw a line and permanent marker. She has always been like that. She never rewards people who take advantage of others, and she never scolds someone for setting a boundary that should have been respected in the first place. When I think about her response, her firm tone, her decisive action, and the $200 she sent with the note encouraging me to spend it on something that was for me and not for the household I had been supporting since childhood, there is only one way to describe her. Queen behavior. Dad and Nicole had started paying for childcare, family members stopped messaging me moral lectures, and for once in my life, things seemed like they were settling into something normal. Of course, peace never lasts long in my family, especially when my stepmother has access to a phone and an internet connection. Nicole is the kind of person who truly believes that if she posts something with enough dramatic wording, the entire world will salute her as the tragic matriarch of a household under siege from selfish youth. Which brings us to Facebook. One evening after work, I sat down in my apartment, opened my phone, and saw that I had been tagged in several screenshots. Nicole had posted a paragraph-long emotional essay about how she and Dad were heartbroken because I had supposedly extorted my own parents by forcing them to pay for babysitting. She wrote that she could not believe how cold family had become, how I had taken advantage of their generosity, and how parents should not be financially punished for trusting their children. She added sentimental lines about their honeymoon being ruined and how people should be grateful for the sacrifices their parents made. She never tagged me directly, but she might as well have attached a neon sign. Some relatives jumped in to offer sympathy. Some stayed quiet. Others liked the post, either because they agreed or because they were afraid of being the next target. The thing is, Nicole did not understand that I had been doing the work of a paid adult caretaker since I was 12. She was framing it as if I had suddenly turned on them out of greed, when in reality I'd quite literally saved Dad and Nicole thousands of dollars over the years. I had the receipts to prove it. Literally. I had a folder of expenses going back years. At the time, I did not save things because I planned revenge. I saved them because I was budgeting every cent and needed to track where my money went. Over time, the list turned into a record of how much I had quietly taken on without complaint. So instead of responding online in a public spat, I did something that was both logical and deeply satisfying. I opened a spreadsheet. I itemized every cost I had personally covered from age 15 to 22. School supplies for Liam and later Ava, because someone had to get notebooks and crayons when Dad was stuck at work and Nicole forgot the teacher's lists. Friday night pizzas for years because Dad would leave cash on the counter but not enough to feed 3 kids, so I filled the gap. Clothes I bought on sale when the kids hit growth spurts and suddenly nothing fit. Emergency babysitting when Dad forgot about late shifts or when Nicole decided she needed a night out with no warning. I even included groceries and basic household costs I paid for when the pantry was empty and payday was still 5 days away. The total came to just over $8,400. Seeing the number in bold font at the bottom of the spreadsheet made me sit back in my chair for a moment. That was the cost of a used car, a semester of university, or months of rent in my apartment. That was the price tag of being the responsible kid in a house where responsibility flowed upward instead of downward. Once the spreadsheet was complete, I attached it to an email addressed to the entire extended family. No social media theatrics, no name-calling, no emotional paragraphs about betrayal. Just numbers, dates, descriptions, and receipts attached for verification. I included one paragraph at the top that simply stated that Nicole had accused me of financially exploiting my parents by expecting they pay for childcare, and that in order to address the matter fairly, I believed the actual financial record should be shared openly. I followed it with a closing sentence that read that if anyone wanted to calculate who owed whom, I was happy to continue this discussion. Then I hit send. The silence that followed was not just silence, it was a vacuum. It was the kind of silence that fills a room and presses down on every piece of furniture. It was the kind of silence that says someone realized they pushed the wrong button, and now the missile had come back around. Some family members quietly removed their likes from Nicole's post. Others stopped replying entirely. A few sent private messages saying variations of they did not know how much I had done. No one replied publicly. It was glorious. The next day, Nicole deleted her post from Facebook without acknowledging it ever existed. No apology, no revised statement, no admission of speaking too soon. She simply erased it, as if removing the words from public view rewound reality itself. Then she messaged me privately with a short statement, telling me that we should not involve outsiders in family matters. I stared at my phone for a few seconds. This woman had been the one who made it public first. She had written a dramatic essay about me in front of the entire online family circle, implying that I was greedy and ungrateful, and now she wanted to act like I had broken some sacred tradition by responding with facts and basic accounting. I did not fight with her. I did not send paragraphs. I just logged the moment in my memory as yet another example of how she preferred narratives over accountability. If there is one truth in life, it is that some people are offended not by the conflict itself, but by losing control of the story. All I could think was that she had built a bonfire, lit the match, and was now startled that the flames had spread and shown her own actions in broad daylight. My response was short and accurate. "Ma'am, you made it public first." A few weeks after the spreadsheet incident, after Grandma's disciplinary strike, after Facebook went quiet and relatives suddenly decided they had always been neutral, I was invited to Dad and Nicole's house for dinner. I almost did not go because dinner at that house historically meant being ambushed with speeches about how I was letting the family down. But something felt different. The tone of the invitation was not loaded. No sighing voice, no hint of pressure, just a simple request. I walked into their house expecting a guilt trip, a lecture, or at the very least a passive-aggressive comment served with the mashed potatoes. Instead, they sat across from me at the dining table, both looking slightly nervous in a way I had never seen before. Nicole had the posture of someone bracing for impact, and Dad looked like a man who had discovered self-reflection for the first time in 48 years. I waited for the usual script. I expected Dad to start with how parenting is hard, or how family should be flexible, or how I should understand their circumstances. Instead, he took a deep breath and said that the Mexico situation forced them to confront the fact that they had been relying on me far too much. They admitted that hiring a sitter for 10 straight days made them realize how much work I had been doing for free for years, and that it was unfair to me, especially now that I had my own life. Then Dad said something I never thought I would hear in my lifetime. He said that they did not parent me correctly in a lot of ways, that I had always been the responsible one, and instead of protecting me from pressure, they had leaned into it. He apologized. It was not tear-filled, it was not dramatic, but it was sincere. Coming from a man who expresses feelings at the emotional depth of a coffee mug, it was practically an award speech with orchestral music playing underneath. Then Nicole chimed in that they had made a decision together. They had hired a full-time nanny. Not temporary, not occasional, not a patch on a sinking schedule, but a permanent childcare solution. Someone who would pick the kids up from school, help with homework, handle bedtime when they needed coverage, and generally allow the house to function like a household where adults carry the adult responsibilities. They told me that they had already signed the contract and adjusted their budget. They were handling childcare themselves. For a few seconds, I just sat there. It felt surreal. I had been waiting half my life for someone in that house to acknowledge that my role had been more than older brother. I had been carrying the family for so long that hearing them finally see it was both strange and liberating. It did not erase the exhaustion. It did not undo the hundreds of nights I fell asleep in my college textbooks while listening for a toddler crying in the next room. But for the first time, I felt like someone had looked directly at the situation and understood the weight I had been carrying. Things changed after that conversation. Slowly at first, then noticeably. Suddenly, when I visited, the kids were not flung into my arms with instructions and a timer running. Instead, Dad would tell me they'd already been fed, homework was done, and bedtime routines were handled. Now I had energy to actually be their brother. I could take them to the zoo and not spend the whole day worried that I would be up until midnight doing dishes. I could sit on the couch and play video games with Liam without being the one responsible for remembering that the laundry needed folding. I could read Ava a bedtime story because I wanted to, not because I was the only adult around. The resentment I had never wanted began to dissolve. I found myself laughing with them more. I enjoyed their excitement when I pulled up to the house. They got to see me as someone fun, not someone who was always stretched thin. And Dad changed too. He actually began participating. He was home more often in the evenings. He turned up early instead of late. He helped get dinner ready. I would walk into the kitchen and find him cutting vegetables or helping Liam check math homework. It was like watching a man who finally realized he had missed part of his own life and was trying to make up the difference. I will not pretend everything is perfect. The past is still there. Years of default responsibility do not vanish just because someone signs a nanny contract and apologizes. But the energy is different. The system shifted. I am not the third parent anymore. I am the oldest sibling, finally in the role I should have been allowed to have from the beginning. And honestly, I think I was the wake-up call they needed. If the situation had gone differently, if something had happened while they were out of the country, Child Protective Services could have gotten involved, and the damage would have been far worse than a $1,420 credit card charge. Dad and Nicole had been functioning under the assumption that I would always sacrifice my time, my schooling, my career, my peace, because they had gotten used to me doing it. Once that assumption broke, everything had to be reevaluated. But I will admit something. My favorite part of the entire complicated saga was still the sight of Grandma Dorothy calling my father an idiot while pressing grocery money into my hand. That moment will live in my memory forever. It was the perfect blend of discipline, comedy, and unconditional support that only a 72-year-old grandmother raised in a different era can deliver. So yes, the story ended better than expected. I got boundaries. Dad and Nicole got clarity. The kids got actual childcare. And I got to reclaim my place in the family without a laundry list of duties attached.